I guess I was probably about 3 years old, and I would go over to the pool because my dad ran the pool, so I would go over there every day. I would just jump in, I would swim around from the age of 3 until whenever, until I stopped going into that pool. I started really competing because I would say around the age of 4, because at that time, all the kids from all the city schools would come down to the pool and learn how to swim and everything. And my father would always say, you have to do it like him. So they were probably 10 years old, 11, 12. So I would go in and compete against them. I enjoyed swimming, but I also I played hockey and baseball, and I really enjoyed playing team sports. So probably when I was around 10, I told my dad I wanted to play water polo, and he said, "Oh no, you can't play water polo. You're not big enough, and you're playing against men. They're bigger than you, and you'll get hurt and everything." And I said, "Well, I'd like to give it a try." So I think I was about 10 when I started playing water polo because I wanted to play a team sport. I got my first Canadian championship when I was 11. Probably because my dad was a coach, so he let me play on the junior team. And at that time, the junior age limit was 21. So I was 11 playing against 21-year-old. At that time, they were young men. Pretty hard when you were younger because the older gentlemen, they like to pick on the younger fellas. And so I learned very early that you had to play a smart game. You had to play smarter than them. You couldn't go near them. You had to stay away from them. And back in those days, I could probably swim better than most of them. So I learned to use my speed to the advantage that I was capable of getting. After my father died, got into the mode where I didn't like the way it was going with the older fellows around the club. It was probably 68. I decided that I was going to start coaching the club. And it was a transition where it was hard to get rid of the older fellows because I grew up watching these old fellows play and watching them coach. But I thought it was for the best of the city and the club if we went into a different approach to the game. We went into the game with younger players and we started rebuilding the club and making it stronger from a young standpoint. So I took a bunch of kids because we had a great high school league, and I took a bunch of young fellas, you included, and I said, we're going to go to the Canadian Championships in '69. And we went there, we were lucky enough, we won, and then next thing you know, I was down at the pool 7 days a week, and it became a hobby for me that I had to do, and I had to keep it going. And with the help of a lot of people around here, and especially Bill Vanderpool really helped me a lot. He organized a club where we built the club into, at times in the early 70s, we were going to the provincial championships with 4 or 5 teams. I had built the club, Bill and myself, and helped with Roy Gunnell and guys around here. We built the club and had nowhere to go, but we had to keep going up and up. So I had to keep this high school league going, which was good because our high school kids, they probably played 40 games a year. And this included players who, probably played on the C or the D team. They were never going to make the A or B team to go to the nationals, but it kept them playing water polo for 10 months of the year. Like I always said, a coach is only as good as its players. But my main thing in coaching was I wanted to get the best out of each individual. I believed if you respected them, they respected you. And I sort of forced them to play above their level because I thought if you push somebody and you made them believe that they could do something, when they did it, it was a great accomplishment for them, for the player themselves. And it was an accomplishment for me because I was so happy that they accomplished more than what they thought they could do. There was other things, and probably coaching. I learned from coaches, older coaches in the world. Not only the players have to keep learning, the coaches have to keep learning. And one person in particular was a fellow by the name of Lackey, and he was coaching the Cuban national team. He was a Hungarian fellow. And he told me, when I first started coaching, never stop learning yourself. And so I pushed myself to, make the game fun also for the guys playing the game. And I also believed in education. I believed in sometimes some of them didn't like me because I pushed them to go to school when they didn't want to go to school. But I had certain rules, and if you followed the rules, we all got along great. And you would achieve more than what you thought you could do. And that was my main thing in coaching. A good 5-6 years where I played with most of the guys. My idea of coaching was you have to fulfill your job. And so when I was coaching and playing, then I had two jobs. I had to fulfill my job in the water too. And if I made a mistake, it's hard to say, but I would yell at myself in front of them. It was my fault. Okay, what I did, I tell you not to do. Now you see what happens if you do the stupid mistake. It costs you a goal, and it could cost you the game. I believed in coaching with what I had, not what I wanted them to be. Like a lot of coaches go in and they coach teams and say, we want to play like the Serbians or the Hungarians or the Americans. I had a philosophy that we played as a team that was there. And I used sometimes rack my brains about how to play against different teams, what to do. And I tried to change things up so they never knew what we were going to do. I had players that were really good and then players that weren't really good, but I knew that if I put them in a position, they could play as well as anybody else. And, just to use the example of you're not a goal scorer, you're a defender. Other coaches that I coached against, like you say, you called them young bucks coming up and everything, they always wanted to, of course, beat me. And it made me probably a better coach. And I'll just use two names as an example that probably made me a better coach because they started coaching, they were coaching great teams themselves. Robert Cuellar from Montreal and John Stockdale from BC. These were two up and coming young bucks ready to take my little perch on top of the hill, and I pushed myself to coach better than them and coach my teams better than them. And, eventually they became great coaches. They both are legends in themselves now. But at the time, it was like I wasn't going to let them knock me off my little perch. So I worked harder myself with my brain, my little brain, to do the best job I could do. (1969), when I took all the players, some players from the high school league, and I formed that first team to go. That was a big thrill for myself. It was a big thrill for the kids. Then going down, years and years after, there was, to me, every championship we won, and especially at the university level, everyone was a thrill for me. It was all those teams that I coached. I could never, ever pick one team that was better than another, because that's the way I coached, and that's the way I wanted my players to have the mentality that we were all equal. We all did it. Somebody won in 72, somebody won in 76, somebody won in 80. They were all equal, and all those teams were all equal on the same lines. One team that it was probably my fault. I can't remember. I think it was 1978 or 79. We had two teams in the national seniors, and I honestly thought our second team was good enough to be in the medals. And in my mind, I probably pushed it too much, and I didn't really focus myself enough on the B team, because the senior A team wasn't as good as what it normally was, with guys being injured and some retiring. And the B team was an up-and-coming team that I probably should have put more of my focus on that team, because I think that probably the B team could have beat the A team in the final. It was hard at times, because once we decided to change the club around and go young and have the older gentlemen step away that were there for years, that I grew up watching and admired the way they played, they were still around in the background, and it was something that something that they did maybe push me harder to coach and become a half decent and a well-recognized coach. Was the old saying was from the older fellows all the years, and it still sort of haunts me now. Everybody always said, "You'll never be as good as your dad." And so it was a driving force that, I will maybe never be as good, but I will try my hardest. And it sort of pushed me, and it was a good thing, maybe. I sometimes I used to get mad at them and say, no, who will be as good as him? But I will try, and I tried. So that's kept me going.